Hi. So the Suggs family is back with another history lesson. We are picking up from last week where we were talking about indentured servitude. And we talked about a couple of things in this aspect of what we call ourselves African Americans and the laws that have been created for the so-called African American or Negro or colored or whatever name that they decided to label us, which is the current African American. So we will talk on some colonial laws and talk about if this discussion, if these laws still affect us today as the so-called African Americans. So let's get it started. Hi, honey.
Hello.
Okay, so as a refresher, we were talking about indentured servitude, not slavery, because this is the way things started in this country with indentured servants coming into this country. So we'll start off on, this is called indentured servitude in colonial America. On one half to 2/3 of all immigrants in colonial America arrived in as indentured servants. At times, as many as 75% of the population of some colonies were under the term of indenture. Even on the frontier, according to the 1790 U.S. Census, 6% of the Kentucky population was indentured. The importation of white servants under contracts known as indentures proved more profitable as a short-term labor sourced in enslaving Indians or using free labor. Eventually, the final attempt to ease labor shortages was enslavement of Africans. Wherever you find slavery, you will first find indenture. So I want to stop right there a minute. And I want to pick up from a book by Jack Forbes, Africans and Native Americans, The Language of Race and the Evolution of the Red-Black Peoples. He writes, I discovered that Native American descendants have been legally defined as mulattoes in Virginia in 1705 without having any African ancestry. Thus I knew that the dictionaries were wrong and that there was a lot that was hidden from view by the way most authors had written about the southern United States, about slavery, and about colored people. Sorry if you hear an egg timer. I'm trying to keep this to 30 minutes, so I have it set up so keep me on track. He also writes, for example, the term Indian or Indio has been applied to many peoples, including the Indians of South Asia, as well as all groups found in the West Indies or the Americas, and the East Indies, which includes Filipinos, Chinese, Japanese, etc. The term Negro has been applied to Black Africans, the Indians of India, Native Americans, Japanese, and slaves of whatever ancestry. Black has been used for all of the above, and basically for all non-whites in general. Okay. So we're going to get into some of these things to explain and break that down a little bit differently. So first of all, I wanted to talk about, I'm going to read something from Maryland, because I'm from D.C. So D.C., Maryland, Virginia, they all come together because when slavery first started, when people came into Virginia. So in that little area right there is basically the South, is where most of the slavery was anyway because of the plantations. Now the North, people may have worked in stores or something like that, and it was a totally different concept as a part to being from the different North and South. So this is taken from Researching Black Families at the Maryland Hall of Records by Phoebe Jacobson. And the copy is kind of dark because I copied from offline. So in 1634, Maryland settled, it's dark, as a British colony under grant made by King Charles II to Cecil Calvert, 2nd Lord Baltimore. Fewer than 150 settlers arrived on the Ark of Dove. Most were Protestants, church people. One Portuguese mulatto, Matthias de Souza, arrived as an indentured servant to the Jesuits. By 1637, De Souza was a free man. Okay, I want to stop there because I have something that I wanted to read about De Souza. De Souza, this is taken from a website, Exploring Maryland's Roots Library. Matthias De Souza, historians know very little about the early Maryland settler. The documents record his life, details of his life. Some people recognize Matthias as the first person of African descent living in Maryland. Others simply find his life inspiring. So he was an indentured servant who worked for Father Matthew White, a Catholic priest. An indentured servant is someone who has to work as a servant for someone for a period of 4 to 7 years. Sometimes the servant agrees to work because they have no money and they need to pay off debt. Sometimes the servant needs to work because he cannot find another job. Sometimes he's just explaining what that is. So no matter what reason, he agreed to come to with Father White. His job gave him a chance to see the new world. When Matthew's journeyed to Maryland, he worked for the Jesuit priests who were a mission to establish churches in North America for the Catholic Pope in Rome.
Wow.
When Jesuits officials gave Father Andrew White the chance to settle in Maryland, he brought along with him 9 servants, including Matthias. Matthias may have been a Catholic, but it's likely that many of the servants who came to America with the Jesuits were Catholic. So I'm not going to really read everything about him, but in his last name, De Souza, in common in Portugal, where perhaps Matthias' father was born. He also did not know Matthias De Souza thought of himself. Okay, we don't need to know all that, but we're just specifying here that this guy had a Portuguese name, Hispanic name. Matthias De Souza came here as with African ancestry and was supposedly been the first person of color indentured servant in Maryland. So we'll go with what it says. The term mulatto used by the priest is the old spelling for mulatto, defined in the 17th century as a person of mixed African and European descent. But okay, so we'll leave that at that, because these terms change based on where you were. Because that was an old Portugal definition saying that it was based on African and European descent. But in Virginia, at one point, it was based on African and Indian descent. And then in America, it was based on African and European descent. So depending on where you were, it could have meant a different thing. So the next one, so we'll read. In 1715, marriages between white women and black or mulatto men forbidden. And clergy was performed, any clergy that performed such marriages were penalized. Children of these unions to serve for a specified number of years. Freedom of movement and activity of blacks restricted. Manumissions could no longer be granted by will or by deed. And that was in 1752. Did I say the marriage law changed in 1715? So before, if they didn't have a law that changed this, then it was no law. See, everything that when they make a law, it's because something already happened, and they said, "Oh, we need to make this a law." So you got these, because of course, when we look back at last week's video, if you look at the Suggs family video from last week, we talked about the relationships between the indentured servants. Women that came here because and made it with the so-called Negro men that made all these mulatto children. So they had to struggle with an invention of a new race. So you're not talking about just black and white anymore. You're talking about a mixture of black and white, making something that they call mulatto, depending on where you were in the country. So we'll just read one. Elizabeth Banks, born 1665, was a white servant of Major James Jordan. On June 20th, 1863, when she was presented in the York County Court for fornication and bastardy with a Negro slave. She was given 39 lashes, and the term of her indenture was extended. She was apparently the mother of Mary, born in 1683, and Anne, born in 1685. And you can find this stuff on the Free African Americans website, because it'll trace back some of these ancestors for you. And let's see, we're already 10 minutes in. Okay, so to keep it moving, so we're talking about Maryland. So let's go back to some of these things that they have in Maryland. Free blacks in 1805. Free blacks are ordered to register with the county courts in 1805. So they already had free blacks in 1805. Because remember, people were coming here as indentured servants. There was no chattel slavery until after Bacon's rebellion. Then the white folks got scared and they said, oh no, we got to start making more laws. That's what they do. When they get scared, they don't know what to do, they make more laws. Okay, here we go. So, in 1810, free blacks lost the right to vote through an amendment in the state constitution. This is the state of Maryland. So, before 1810, people of color had the right to vote. Free blacks had the right to vote. Here we go again. So that meant we lost our right to vote. So what does that say? They didn't want us coming in there helping to make no laws. They're like, okay, first of all, we're going to make them register with the county. You know, make sure that we know you here. Yeah. And then we're going to take away your right to vote. Okay, here we go. 1830, the census showed Maryland's population to be about 291,108 whites, 52,938 free blacks.
Wow.
102,994 slaves, not indicated who were slaves though in this, but Maryland had the largest number of free blacks than any state in the Union, with Anne Arundel, Charles, and Prince George's County having the greatest number of slaves. 30% of the free blacks lived in Baltimore City.
Wow.
Baltimore City. All right. Marylanders formed a state colonization society in 1831. You know what that is?
What is
it? Mama been doing her homework. All right, here we go. The Maryland State Colonization Society. State support was revitalized at Nat Turner's rebellion in August 1831 in Virginia. So, Nat Turner's rebellion tried to get them like, okay, they had been thinking about trying to do something with the free blacks. So they came up with this idea to revitalize. Oh, maybe we need to bring this back up. Many white Southerners believed the free blacks in Virginia were responsible for inciting the actions of Turner and other slaves. By 1820, until slavery was abolished, Maryland had the largest population of free blacks in the United States. Didn't I just read that from the other thing?
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, white Marylanders were particularly worried that a similar violent slave uprising could take place within their borders. Like many Southern slaveholding states, horrified, Maryland legislatures immediately instituted new laws to regulate and restrict the movements and activities of free blacks and slaves. Since colonization in Africa seemed to be a solution to this problem, the Maryland General Assembly reinstated its appropriation to settle free black Marylanders in Liberia during the 1831-32 legislation section, committing itself to paying the society an annual sum of $10,000 for 20 years. So you know what that meant? They was trying to make people go back to Africa. They was trying to set up a free society in Liberia to re-establish the free black, so-called black population here. Okay, well, let's see what they said. Let's see what they thought about that.
So where did all these black people, free black people, come from?
Exactly. Well. Okay, so we're going to go back to that. So
slaves,
okay, yeah, hold on. So okay, let me finish on this right quick. So, the Maryland faced challenges in 1831. Only 1,025 immigrants were sent to Liberia, while the numbers of recorded manumissions during that period was 5,571. Manumissions is when they freed you. they could free you. You could free the people then. This wasn't chattel slavery, but they came back later and made laws that you couldn't, the manumission was over. Nobody could be freed.
They changed the whole ball game.
Exactly. However, the number of recorded manumissions was probably lower than the actual number of slaves freed, since now all slave owners filed manumissions. Furthermore, during this same period, the total population of free blacks in the state increased at a much higher rate, from 51,392 in 1930 to 83,000.
Wow.
900. So you're talking about by 1960, you're talking about 30 years. We didn't almost double the numbers. Right. At 30 years. So, you know, they gotta make more laws. We gotta make more laws, okay? Yeah. So we go. In the report, Society's Board of Managers, traveling agent John Kennard ironically summarized many of the key reasons that blacks oppose colonization. He's like, man, go on over there. What? They, the free blacks, are taught to believe, and do believe that this is their country. Why would we believe that? Why would we think that Africa was our country? Why wouldn't we believe that Africa is our country? And we going up through ancestry and we believe that Africa is our country. Let's go back to that.
Right.
And this is their country and their home. A country and home now wickedly withholding from them, but which will presently possess, own, and control. Those who immigrate to Liberia are held up to the world as the vilest and various traitors to their race, and especially so towards their breathing in bonds. Every man and woman and child who leaves this country for Africa is considered to be one taken from the strength of the colored population, and by his departure is protracting the time when the black man will be, by the strength of his own arm, compel those to despise and oppress him, to acknowledge his rights, redress his wrongs, restore the wages long due and iniquitously withholden. So that's sad. But that said a lot to me. Because, they saying, what the heck, what are you talking about? You saying that you want to leave this, because you want to leave home and go there?
Go
to Liberia, where you know nothing about.
And they knew they was home.
Well,
they know America was their home.
Well, let's go back, because we're looking at these laws. Oh, we only got a few more minutes. Okay, we got to bring it down. All right, let me go back. Okay, so we're talking about the people that they're calling colored. Hold on, let me go. I got so many windows open. Which one am I going to look for? Not that one.
See, we got to look at this from a lot of angles. We have to just, not accept what was told to us.
Okay, a good website for a lot of this stuff is freeafricanamerican.com. If you're doing genealogy work, it's just reading through that from the different states, from DC, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina. And the thing about it is, when we look at these timelines of these things that happen, we have to remember that the way that they first set things up, the city names change, but the land doesn't change, but the city names may change. They might change the way that they had it broken up. Like Kent County may have been this big, and then they break it up and make it Prince George's County and Montgomery County. So we have to look at that type of stuff when we're doing genealogy search. But I wanted to go back quickly to because my time is ticking, and I may not be able to get to it. So here we're going to go to, in this 10 minutes, at the beginning of the trade slave, the British interest in Africa was for African produce rather than the slave trade. So between 1553 and 1660, numerous charters were granted by the British merchants to establish settlements on the west coast of Africa to supply goods such as ivory, gold, pepper, dye, and indigo. Who was the charter set up by? The British royalty. Okay, we should know that. There is such a rivalry on the west coast of Africa between other European powers, especially between Portugal, Holland, Denmark, and Sweden. I thought it was only the British. That's all we ever talk about. Well, it was a whole bunch of people that was hitting that. Okay, so I wanted to. I'm gonna hit this right quick. I was looking for you and you. That's the thing I was looking for earlier. I'm not going to be able to finish this all, so we're going to have to make another video because I'm not going to be able to get into everything. But I wanted to read this document called The Negro because we're talking about Maryland, D.C., and Virginia. Virginia was the first home of the British colonies in North America. Anthony, one of the Negroes in the shipload that arrived in 1619, married Isabella and son born to them in 1624, of whom there was record, was the first native Negro in Virginia. The infant was taken from his home and coached into Jamestown in 1625, and there christened William in honor of Captain William Tucker. Another Anthony, who probably became in 1622 with his wife Mary, were bound servants in 1625. This is before chattel. But by 1651, Anthony Johnson had secured his freedom and accumulated high funds to import 5 servants. He imported 5 servants on whose head right he acquired 250 acres on the eastern shore. First free Negro and first Negro landowner in Virginia, Anthony Johnson perhaps added the added distinction of being the first person in the colony, white or black, to hold a lifetime servant, a Negro who had committed no crime. Johnson petitioned the court in Northampton County in 1653 for the return of one John Kaser, a runaway Negro who he claimed for life. Although Kaser protested that he had already been held 7 years longer than he should or ought, he was returned to his master for life. As far as it was known, this is the first judicial sanction in the English colonies of life servitude where crime was not involved. So this black guy, so-called black guy, that came as an indentured servant, sent for 5 servants and acquired 250 acres because he bought in servants. So one of them, he's going to make his slave for life. And this was a so-called black man doing this to another so-called black man.
Wow.
About 300 Negroes were in the colony in 1650, about 6,000 in 1700, about 30,000 in 1730. By 1776, there were 270,262 slaves and 297,352 free persons, several thousands of whom were Negroes. So why do we all think that we came here as slaves? See, that's a different thing.
Yeah.
This is talking about indentured servant. We came here as indentured servants and made it with, some of them, with Caucasian women, and made a race of people that some people call mulattoes, depending on where they were. But, so, you know, they also had people that came in that was not just, they had East Indians that were here, that were classified as Africans. They had, I read from the Egyptians were here. So they had different people that were here before they even started chattel slavery. So I was looking for this. 5 minutes, okay. Stricter slave codes emerged in Virginia after Bacon's Rebellion in 1676. This is when things started changing. When wealthy planters decided to abolish indentured servitude and establish permanent slavery for Africans, fearing that class conflict would undermine their tobacco plantations holding. They gradually eliminated the importation of indentured servants from in England in favor of enslaved Africans. Though many of Virginia's slave codes address specific conflicts, one law enacted in 1701 offered a bounty for killing a runaway named Billy, who was allegedly had robbed and destroyed crops. Most were designed to aggressively curb the movement and activity of slaves. Social and cultural separation of blacks and whites was started when Virginia planters began establishing laws based on the assumptions that Africans were an inferior race.
Wow.
So see how that changed? Because we were here, they said, okay, here's another one. Slavery was legally recognized in Virginia with the passage of the 1661 Fugitive Slave Law. The punishment of adding time to a permanent of service, which is commonly used for indentured service, was not useful because the servitude of slaves was permanent. The statutes did decree, however, that if a white servant ran off with a slave, he would have to serve his penalty term plus that of the slave.
So, if you married a slave, you had to become a slave.
Here we go. I'm gonna point on this last one. I'm gonna skip these because we only got a few minutes. Virginia passed 2 acts in 1682 that combined Native Americans and Africans into one category as Negroes and other slaves. As Negroes and other slaves. So they classify, if you were a slave, they an Indian and an African, they classify you as Negroes and other slaves, because they we have to really get into breaking this down for you, because it's the way that they word things. They would be 2 different sets of people, because you can read something that say black, and the next thing you know, they say Negro. So who they talking about? They talking about the black, or they talking about the Negro? Because that's 2 different things. It's the way they word things, and we read over top and we read them like, oh yeah, the black and the Negro. Yeah, well, why did they change that up? Okay, so we're talking about, so we're classified as Negro. So I had mentioned on the mulatto thing for us. So the mulatto, no, I don't have time. So we're going to wrap this up because I didn't get to touch on everything that I wanted to, but I wanted to keep this to 30 minutes. And so I have this one last thing that I wanted to say, and that is changing one's habits of thought is a long-range project happening over years, not weeks or months. The essential traits of a critical thinker requires an extended period of development. And we only got a couple of minutes, so did y'all want to ask any questions? Y'all was much more interactive. I know I tried to compress it. So
I think you covered some good points.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't get a chance to cover the laws and everything like that. So anything that I didn't touch on last week, I may come back and touch back on it if I don't think I gave it enough time. I'll come back and touch on it and move forward to give you guys some more information. But anything that I put out there, do some research, check it out, look for it, Google these things. Oh, I wanted to tell you about 2 books that are on the web that is free. I mean, you don't have to print it out, but it's called Free Negro Owners of Slaves in the U.S. in 1830, and it was written by George Washington Carter G. Woodson. So it's Free Negro Owners of Slaves in the United States in 1830, written by Carter G. Woodson. And also the second one that you can look at this online, just so you can get a different perspective of this history that's out here for people to read, and that is the Negro Laws of South Carolina. The Negro Laws of South Carolina is like 4 chapters of laws that were created specifically for the Negro, and a lot of these laws may or may not have been addressed even with us being so-called free. If they still have those laws in effect, this could be the reason why we're seeing a lot of these cops getting away with killing people, or why, in The Color Purple, Sophia hit that white man and went to prison, but he get no time for hitting her. So it's those type of things that we have to look at and be like, are these Negro laws still in effect? And thank you for watching. Peace and love.
All I'm gonna say is we have to look into those documents, because we could not. It was against the law for us to read around those times. But now we can read, and we can go back and research some of the things that they was writing about us, and you will be astonished at what you find. So I think Irma's doing a good job on researching this stuff, and these are the things we got to look at, because it's in plain sight. I'm out.
Peace and love.